How we doing? Are y'all ready for a show today? All right. Well, the man's here. He's backstage with me, so he can hear you. All right, so that was awkward, y'all. Let's try it. I said, he can hear you. That is so much better. But before we get started, please check out our screens. So you don't, cool. All right, so looks like we're missing that. We'll make sure to get that for later. So, Comic-Con Cape Town, do me a favor. Please put your hands together and welcome to the stage, the one, the only, the incomparable. Give it up for Ian McDiarmid.
Greetings from the dark side. It's a real pleasure to be here in South Africa. Hi.
Oh, so good to see you.
Good to be here.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Have a seat, have a seat, have a seat. All right. Of course, you could be in the red chair. That's the right one.
There you are.
So how you been?
Very well indeed. I'm grateful to be still alive. I mean, but the Emperor's not, by the way, in case you thought that was a spoiler. Yeah.
I don't know. Things keep happening. You never know what
It's true.
what Filoni and those guys are going to be up to.
Nobody ever knows what's going to happen next in the dark side of Disneyland.
So for the folks that don't know, tell them how you got involved in Star Wars to begin with.
Well, it was quite a long time ago. I mean, I think Anthony Daniels holds the record for being in most Star Wars films over a long period of time, but I'm in the number 2 place. It happened one day. My agent phoned, you know, the way they do, and said, George Lucas wants to see you. I thought, okay. And then I knew that Star Wars was being filmed, Return of the Jedi, to be precise, down at Elstree. So I thought, but I heard they'd already started shooting, so it's maybe about something else. Anyway, a car arrived, I went in it, they took me to Elstree. It was their lunchtime, because indeed he was shooting. Richard Marquand, the director, and George came in, said hello, and we chatted about, I don't know, the weather, England and America, and then they said, very nice to meet you, thank you for coming out. And I thought, oh, well, whatever it is, I got to meet George Lucas. That's good. And then as I walked out of the door, I overheard behind me George say to Richard, that guy's got a great nose. So I thought, oh, well, at least he likes my nose. And then I got back and my agent called and said, you've got the part. I said, great. Well, what's the part? And he said, give me a minute, you know, agents leafing through these endless bits of paper. Apparently, he said, it's called the Emperor of the Universe. So I said, well, I guess we'll be doing it then. And that's how it all started.
That's absolutely fantastic. So you go through, you do your shoot for the first 3 movies, and then, you know, about 10 years later, you get a call.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, you know, it happened in a sequence, as you say, as a sequence of 3. I mean, you know the phrase, third time lucky? Well, I got lucky 3 times. So the second time was George was in town, staying at a hotel this time. They hadn't started filming. And asked to see me, and I went in, and he said, hi, Ian. Do you know anyone who wants to play an emperor? And I thought, oh, that's his indirect way of still offering me the part. So I said, well, I think you know the answer to that. And he said, okay, we're going back in time, and that means you can play your own age. I thought, how old does he think I am? Anyway, it turned out to be early 50s, which was indeed my own age. And he said, it's the beginning of the Palpatine journey. Well, not the beginning, but the beginning as far as the movies are concerned. And he's a senator. He's a perfectly ordinary, hypocritical politician. And I thought, well, they're easy to play. You know, they're on your screens every 5 minutes. I just have to copy one of those. But then he said, and there's this other guy who's sort of dark and mysterious and in the background, and he'll appear in the odd hologram. And I thought, well, that sounds a bit more interesting than the senator. However, you know, very pleased to be asked. And then, you know, we said goodbye, and we went through all the usual procedures. A script arrived, and I saw that a character called Darth Sidious had my name against it. And I thought, they don't make mistakes on this kind of series, but how can I be playing both parts? And then I worked it out. And then I did 3 movies, you know, with spaces in between, climaxing in that series in Revenge of the Sith, which has just had, yes, somebody's been seeing it recently perhaps, it's just had its 20th anniversary. Yeah, hey, I think it may still be available in cinemas over here. Anyway, worth seeing again, because they improve everything, you know, except my performance, you know, which is set in stone. Then the next phase, Shogaria, I got a call years later, you know, when I was very much older and approaching the age I am now, which is sort of the age of the character in Return of the Jedi. There you go. And it was J.J. Abrams. That was very nice. Charming phone call. Hi, Ian. You know, I'd love to meet you. This is a confidential telephone conversation, of course, but we're thinking of bringing the Emperor back. But I said, he's dead. You know, and I'm getting old, and I haven't really got to that stage yet. No, no, no. He said, we think he's survived. And, well, then, you know the rest. So I was once again awakened, 3rd time lucky. And a lot of people said, well, we're not sure about this. I mean, that was a pretty long fall, and you seemed to be in agony as you fell. How could he possibly have survived that? I went, well, he's the Emperor. In other words, always had a plan B. So plan B was to get the best dynamic, they were quite short, weren't they, surgeons available, and all the latest scientific equipment, and get the body restored as much as possible because the mind was still intact.
So how do you find, you know, clearly you're a lovely human being. I've had the opportunity to spend lots of times with you. Not like Anthony, of course.
Oh, no, let's not get into that.
Oh,
no.
He already came through here once.
We have
so
friends.
They know.
Yes, okay.
How do you find that darkness inside of you being so lovely and English?
Well, Scottish, if you don't mind. You see, there was the darkness creeping out, you see. Yeah, only a little bit, though. I don't know where it comes from. If you're an actor, you sort of observe people all the time, you know, and things, I suppose, happen inside. And if the words do it to you, it comes out. But I think we British, we seem to be always asked to play villains a little more regularly than Americans, although there's a very long list of distinguished American villains too. It may be something to do with vocal quality and everything else, but it's always exciting to play somebody with a backstory, and by goodness, as you know, the Emperor had a very big backstory. So to present one thing and have something else going on, as an actor, that's always exciting. And George said a very good thing to me when we were just beginning to shoot The Phantom Menace. He said, you should think of your face, Ian's face, as a mask, and your eyes, Ian's eyes, as artificial. So in other words, me, more or less, you know, as you saw me a good few years ago, was a mask underneath which was this horrible animal, monster, represented by Darth Sidious. And that was very useful as an actor. And he said at any time, the real person might burst through, but only when the time is right. So that was very useful. So I could keep his anger suppressed until I could unleash it when my face and body changed, you know, after I got rid of Sam Jackson. You know, I mean, go away, Sam, please, really. And which was, no, it was a big loss, actually. I wish he was still in the franchise. Who knows? Maybe they'll bring him back. But then after that, George said, you just let yourself go into this monster. And when we shot that scene, which I'll confess to you now, I think is a little over the top, I said, shall I take it down a bit? He said, certainly not. Go further. So I went further, and you've seen the result.
So what was it like to work with George Lucas?
Great. I'm a great admirer. We're contemporaries. We're the same age. Our birthdays aren't too far apart. And, you know, he's... it's not often you meet an authentic genius who's totally relaxed about himself and about what he does. And he doesn't say a great deal when you're working with him, but he takes a lot of trouble over casting, except in my case, he got me one afternoon because the previous actor who was cast couldn't be insured. I think he was the right age for the part and couldn't be insured because of the contact lenses. So that was a sort of spontaneous moment, and he took the advice of the casting director, great Mary Selway, that I could play old, because she'd seen me do it in, you know, close to in the theater. So, you know, once he casts you, he really lets you get on with it, which is great. And a lot of people, some people complained about the lines, and George would be the first to say he wasn't, you know, William Shakespeare when it came to writing. But I liked what he did, because I could get underneath it, and I could use words like friends and so on, as if they were a bitter, terrible taste in my mouth. So things like that would, you know, go on in my head. And because he couldn't conceive of anybody wanting a friend, because that was a sign of weakness, because it meant you didn't do it all yourself. You know, little things like that occurred to me, and that's how I built the character. But, you know, like a lot of actors in a lot of situations, you learn the lines, you hope you get them soon enough, you turn up, and you're straight into it. But I quite like that. You know, that kind of adrenaline sometimes can produce good results, especially if the director is calm and knows 100% what he's doing, which is obviously the case with George.
How did you find the Emperor's voice?
Yeah, well, you hear my voice, which is sort of deep. It's sort of semi-baritone when I'm speaking naturally, like me, if that's what I'm doing, yes. And I saw his face. The face led to the voice. You see, remember, I was told I was going to be the Emperor of the Universe, and then I was straight into costume. And I thought, oh, what does an emperor look like? Well, an old man in a black cloak with a hood? I don't think so. But of course, that's sort of the genius of the part. And what does he sound like? Well, once they made me up 4 hours later, and I stared into the mirror at that horrible face, you know, I screamed, of course. Then immediately after that, I thought, well, he looks like a toad. He looks like a sort of repulsive reptile, so he should sound like that. And the voice needs to come somewhere like that, as if he's about to be sick. You know, but he wasn't, but people looking at him probably felt like being that. And so it just arrived. And I used it, obviously, on the first day of shooting, and nobody said, okay, stop, or anything. But then halfway through shooting, Richard Marquand said, if I'm going to give you a tape of Clive Revel's voice. Now, you probably know Clive Revel, who's very sadly died recently, all too recently. But he had voiced it in Empire Strikes Back, but he didn't play it because this was an actress in a mask. And I think if he'd seen the face that the Emperor ended up having, he would have changed his voice too. So anyway, I kept on doing my voice, and nobody said stop. But then we went to the recording studio, and almost all of the film is revoiced. In those days, they found it very difficult to separate the great THX sound from the noise in the studio. So you had to do it all over again, more or less. So I was there in the studio in London. George had invited Steven Spielberg along and Kathleen Kennedy, whom I hadn't met, no pressure. And I started the voice. And Steven said, oh my God, you're so evil. I thought, oh, well, that's a good sign. So then I knew I'd be keeping the voice. And that's how it happened.
Was there a moment in your career where you stopped feeling like an imposter and you felt like an actor?
It's very interesting. I mean, an actor's life is sort of it's another way of saying imposter syndrome, really. But most of us are human, you know. We lead separate, quite completely different lives from the characters we're playing. But it's interesting because when people meet me, they haven't seen lots of YouTube videos or whatever, they're usually a little nervous, you know. And when people come up in the street and maybe ask for a picture, you know, if there's not a crowd around, I might do it. But if I say, no, it's not appropriate here, and the voice sort of automatically gets deeper, people back away and look terrified. And that's very useful sometimes.
Now, you did a bunch of stuff before Star Wars that folks may not be aware of.
Yes, I've had a long career, and most of the stuff's been on stage, actually. The films you will have seen and some television series. But I'm primarily a stage actor. I'm very happy to be described as that.
As a stage actor, do you have a character that you enjoyed playing?
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer to that is always the next one, you know. And it's great. I think most actors would say this. It's great if the next one is completely different from the last one, you know. I mean, say, for example, after Palpatine, you want to play the nicest, you know, good guy available. I guess the nicest good guy available is God. Although he's not always that nice. I found this out over my long 80 years. But that's the easy answer. You look for a great script. You look for something in the words that's going to do something in you that will make you act it, hopefully, as well as you can. So that's what you're always looking for, whether it's a stage or whether it's on screen. Of course, I've done a bit of Shakespeare, and if it's Shakespeare, you know the words are good. You've got to find a way of matching up to them and not making them sound as if they were written in the 16th and 17th century. Making them sound as if they were written yesterday, like someone who just sent you a movie script. That's the secret of acting Shakespeare. It's sometimes actors think it's very difficult to do, but it's not really, because all the information is in those lines. Sure, you know, a lot of them are written many years ago and don't sound contemporary. But if you get the thought right and the feeling right, then they'll sound as alive as anything written today. So that's been my approach to Shakespeare anyway. It's not everybody's approach, but I think it's the only one for a contemporary audience.
What's your favorite line of Shakespearean dialogue?
Oh, there are so many. Could be the obvious ones. I suppose when I played the Tempest, Prospero, he's an aging magician, some of you may know this, who's been cast away to a desert island with his daughter, very young daughter. He watches her grow up, but he has a power of magic. And then there's a shipwreck near the island, which he causes. And he has an opportunity to punish all the people who put him out of power and to return to power himself. And he does that with a degree of melancholy. Because although he wants to go back, he's enjoyed being on his own. And he just starts this very long speech, "Don't worry, you're not going to get it. Now our revels all are ended. These are actors, as I foretold you, are all spirits that are melted into air, into thin air." That also kind of sums up what it might be like if I ever gave up acting, which I'm not going to do.
It's always my favorite questions to ask you, those ones.
Yeah.
To sit here and listen to you do Shakespeare, that's just for me.
Okay.
They just got to be here, so. How did technology change the filming process between the 3 decades of Star Wars that you've been in?
Yes, well, greatly, of course. And the reason George took so long between Jedi and Phantom Menace was he was waiting for the technology to catch up. Now, he commissioned most of it, and he was working on most of it. and when he felt it was sort of ready, and it wasn't as ready as he would have liked it to have been, he embarked on, oh, I've suddenly got deeper and louder. He embarked on the Phantom Menace. Meanwhile, he'd perfected various other parts of the industry, you know, sound, THX, and all the rest of it. So working on the Phantom Menace, and to a greater extent on Attack of the Clones, he was coming to terms with the new technology and just finding out how far it could go and what he could do. It was interesting in Phantom Menace, there was supposed to be a digitally created Yoda, but he couldn't get that to look as good as what Frank Oz was doing with the puppet. So the puppet stayed. But by the time we got to Revenge of the Sith, Yoda was fully digitized, and frankly, that's the way he should stay. And I ended up fighting thin air. But you know, in a Star Wars film, most people fight thin air, unless it's Ewan and Hayden together. They certainly fought each other, turning themselves into master swordsmen. I always say to them, well, not anymore because it gets boring, but they should go on the road, you know, with those sabers, you know, and entertain people just with sword fights, because they're, you know, they're of Olympic standard and they train very hard. And you can see that in the movie. But when we were doing Revenge of the Sith, and you know, they had a big fight scene, they did it many times all the way through. And of course, you never see that because it's cut up into segments and interspersed with all the other scenes. But it's wonderful to watch that, you know, actors at the top of their craft performing in a way that, well, digital technology can change, but it can't extract, the word I'm looking for, the human element. And the human element's always important. Now, most of those guys had to work all the time in those 3 films against green screen or blue screen. And often they didn't know what they were fighting when they weren't fighting each other. You know, the enemy of some corps was coming towards them. And George at that stage, of course, hadn't created the enemy digitally and didn't quite know what the enemy was like. So the actors had to then imagine. And Ewan used to say, well, is this a guy I can just, you know, tell to piss off, or is this someone who's a real threat? And George said, I don't know yet. So that's hard for an actor, you know, because if it's someone you don't care about, you just go like that. And if it's a threat, you take it a little more seriously. So these were always kind of issues. But where I was lucky was I always got a big office. Every time the office got bigger, and it was a beautiful stage set. And I said to George, I'm pleased you're not recreating that digitally. He said, no, it's a big deal. When people get power, they always want a bigger office. And it's my pleasure to build them one. So every time I turned up for an office scene, it was bigger, with nice statues and all sorts of things, which was very easy to act. So sometimes the set could be as deep as from where I am now to you, ladies and gentlemen of the back. So I had real space to, as it were, act into. So I was lucky on all sorts of fronts. And I had you know, as we said earlier, a character who really developed and changed and, you know, could show different aspects of the technique of power. And that's always interested me. People who have power. The thing about them is they always want more. It's never enough. It's like people who've got lots of money. They always seem to want more. And you think, well, what can they possibly do with it apart from give it to charity? That's a good thing to do. But there's something about being better than anybody else, which the Emperor certainly wanted to be. And he also wanted to take revenge on all the people he hated all his life and who'd stood in his way. And, you know, he may be a science fiction character, but there are people around from whom one can easily draw on in real life.
I love the fact that now everybody has been introduced to you and they realize that you're not this evil person inside before they go upstairs to meet you here in just a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry, the last bit.
Oh, no, because they're going to get a chance to meet you upstairs
you are. Yes,
for
you're going to come
autographs
That's
and
great.
photo ops.
Yes. Yes, I'll be even less human then. That's good.
So is there anything you're excited about seeing in South Africa while you're here?
Well, the company who invited us here very kindly arranged some great things. There's a wine tour. I'll just be testing, of course. I won't really be drinking, you know. Not much. And, well, I mean, not drinking much. Yes, I know you're quoting me now. It's all over Facebook. The emperor is an alcoholic. Only at the weekends. Now, and then we're going to go. We're going to go everything that's nice about Cape Town. So I want to see as much of that as I can. And then there is a small safari because we haven't got time to go west, I don't think. And that happens over Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday after I've seen all you nice ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to have a nice time. I'm grateful to you all for inviting me.
Well, look, we are so excited. Look, this is the busiest weekend for anything Star Wars related. So
yes.
the fact that you picked here to be, and of all the other places you could be, I'm sure we all really appreciate you joining us here in Cape Town this weekend.
Okay, great. And tomorrow. And they want me to come back tomorrow. Well, that's what they said before I came on. So I'll be here same time tomorrow and maybe able to answer some of your questions, which I'd like to do. See you then.
All right. One more time, make some noise for Ian McDiarmid, everybody.